Hello. So I'm here to talk about ThreeI Atlas again. I've done a few videos on ThreeI Atlas. If you don't know me, I am Dr. Jennifer Lisa Vest. I am a psychic medium, a medical intuitive, and a mystic. I also do have a degree in astrophysics, and I've always been really fascinated with how science and psychic can come together. I think that in the future, we're going to rely both on intuitive information and empirical data and logic, and we're going to bring all of those different epistemologies together. I do have a former career as a philosophy professor as well, so I'm always interested in ideas. So I've been following some of the creators and some of the scientists who've been talking about ThreeI Atlas and just trying to stay abreast of what data is coming out. But I also, as a psychic and a mystic, I know how to go into a trance state and connect to different beings and objects and get information that way. And so I've been channeling ThreeI Atlas. And so today I'm going to talk about both. I'm going to talk about some of the anomalies, some of the data that's come out, something new that came out today. That I saw on Dobsonian's website, Dobsonian's channel. Sorry, I butchered that. But there's a couple of, creators out there who've been trying to stay abreast of the data. And apparently there's a new image that came out today. So I'm going to talk about that. And then I want to talk about all of these anomalies that people, that the scientists are finding, all of these things that don't quite, they don't quite understand. And I just want to remind you that in my last video about ThreeI Atlas, one of the things that I shared with you was how when I was speaking to ThreeI Atlas, what they said to me was that they're sending data to the scientists so that they will understand what's going on with who they are. And they did specifically say that they're sending data that defies their expectations and that it's data that doesn't fit into any of their current understanding of astrophysics. And so it's creating a bit of a crisis in the scientific community where they have models, they have astrophysical models, they have models, they specifically talked about, the forces in physics. We think we've mapped out the forces, the electroweak, the electromagnetic, the strong force, etc. But that this object in the sky is defying those kind of astrophysical models for how things move through space. And so this is putting the scientific community into kind of a tailspin where they don't know what to do. And this explains why they're not releasing data and they're not really putting out papers at the rate that I would expect. So I have been looking at like where the preprints go. So in science, everything has to be, experiments have to be, verified and double checked and peer reviewed, and they then get published if if they're done properly. And that process can take a while. And so if you, run an experiment and you get some exciting data, you can't necessarily publish it right away because it has to go through that peer review process. So what there is as an alternative is preprints, and that's where you kind of put in a paper, you publish a paper, online that hasn't been peer reviewed yet, and you say this is what we found, and this is currently being reviewed. And this just allows scientists to get data out a little quicker. So I've been looking at some of these sites where you can look at these astronomy preprints. And, one thing I find odd, and, someone can correct me if you think it's not odd. I find it odd that while there were lots of, preprints that were published in September, August and September, in October, and also kind of the end of September, there's not been that many. So a very small number. And given how important this is, and also given that that particular time frame of October 1st to 7th was when they were actually going to finally be able to get some kind of closer up pictures, we would have expected to see more preprints coming out in early October than we had seen, say, in August. So I find that a little strange. So moving on, let's talk about the anomalies. I don't have probably a comprehensive list, but listening to a couple of different videos by different people, amateur astronomers, and also some scientists, I came up with the following list. First of all, it has no tail. This is major. And it's kind of ludicrous to me that anyone would think this was not a big deal. Right? I don't have a PhD in astrophysics, but you don't need a PhD in astrophysics. I just have a bachelor's. And it's the definition of a comet. The definition of a comet is, let me see, I think I wrote it down just because I wanted to make sure, right? A celestial object consisting of a nucleus of ice and dust, and when near the sun, a tail of gas and dust particles pointing away from the sun. That's a definition of a comet. Another definition is an icy, small solar system body. Obviously, this is not a solar system body that warms and begins to release gases when it passes close to the sun, a process called outgassing. So we're expecting to see a tail. That's the definition of a comet. In fact, the way you distinguish an asteroid from a comet is a comet has a tail and an asteroid doesn't. Now, comets and asteroids are made of different things. An asteroid is not made of ice the way that a comet is. And so first, that's the first anomaly. There's no tail on this so-called comet. And then there's an anti-tail, which is kind of, I think, a misnomer. It's a jet that's pointing out the front of the comet, which is not a tail, obviously, more like a nose. And it's pointing out, which doesn't really make sense because the solar wind should be pushing any gas to the back to form a tail. So this is another anomaly. Then there's the spectral analysis of the composition of the coma. So there is this, what they're seeing is a lot of nickel, but they're seeing it without iron. They've never seen nickel without iron, and they associate nickel without iron as associated more with something manufactured. But this is from another solar system, so we don't know, right? That's another anomaly. It doesn't have water like you would expect. So they weren't really seeing water. They were seeing, I think, only 4% water in the corona. What kind of, like, again, the definition of a coma. I mean, of a comet, it's the icy body that the ice turns to gas as it gets heated up. They weren't seeing that. And then recently they said all of a sudden there's a gush of water. So again, that's another anomaly. Comets don't have no water and then suddenly a lot of water, right? And then there's another anomaly is the nickel and cyanide combination. So cyanide is, I guess, at least one person said, more associated with organic materials, nickel with mineral. And so that's another interesting anomaly. Then there's the carbon dioxide oxygen ratio. Again, it's unusual. It's never been seen before. Another anomaly is the changes in the polarization of light. And I was happy to see this because this does match what I picked up in my channeling when they told me that the astronomers are not going to be able to take the kind of pictures that they're used to because of the way that light reflects, or they really said doesn't reflect off of the surface of ThreeI Atlas. And now, just for people who don't know what an anomaly is, it's something that doesn't fit the model, right? It's when you have a data point that doesn't fit within your model of what's happening. Like you have a hypothesis, oh, this is a comet, but then you have anomalous data that doesn't actually support that hypothesis. So that's what I'm talking about. These are all things that don't really support the hypothesis that this is a comet. And so another anomalous data point is the unusual trajectory. So it's passing by all of these planets in the solar system, and I forget the percentage probability, but it's something really minute. It's just a very, very small percentage that this could happen by chance. Another anomaly is that it's moving unusually fast. They haven't seen this rate of movement in a comet before. There's also some data that suggests that it's self-illuminated. And again, they don't know what that means. Like, it doesn't fit into their model for what a comet doesn't usually self-illuminate. It's also not really turning. Another anomaly is doesn't appear to be turning around like you would expect a rock tumbling through space is going to be tumbling, right? It's not just going to be traveling like this, because that's not how objects move through space when we're looking at gravity. And so they're not seeing the data that would suggest it's tumbling. And so that's another anomaly. Then there's the shape. It appears to have an anomalous shape. Now, people don't really know what the shape is, but the data that's coming in so far, the images that are coming in so far, suggest that it might have an oval shape, which is anomalous. And correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong about this. I'm just trying to gather what lots of different people are saying into one place. There are also some people saying that it might have changed direction slightly, and that cannot be explained by gravity. And if anyone knows about that, put it in the comments. And then there's this anomalous size. It's anomalously massive. What is it, like 33,000 tons? I'm not sure. But again, it's anomalous. It's just the size of it. Okay, so that's the science. So now let's talk about what I picked up. So I tuned into ThreeI Atlas, and the way that I did it was by holding crystals. And this apparently was important. And they told me that, I was tuning in and I got this, mineral structure. And I actually got kind of a shiny metal surface to it, which suggests to me manufactured. I'm not saying, I know it's manufactured because they didn't give me that information exactly, but they did allow me to see this kind of metallic structure. And what the metal looked like was a kind of metal that when you look at it, you see all of these colors, like abalone, or I don't know what other metals do that, but it's like you look at it and you don't really see like gray metal or silver, you see colors. And so that's what I saw. And then they explained to me that, they were mineral and organic. And I felt like we got a little bit of data that might kind of, possibly confirm that when we saw the, what was it? The nickel and the cyanide. So I did see someone else who said, oh, that could indicate that it's both organic and mineral. So when I connected, what I was aware of was that it doesn't absorb light in the way other objects do, and also because they're multidimensional. So they were explaining to me that they exist multidimensionally, and what we're perceiving is kind of what they look like in our dimension, but they are much more complex than what we can currently see. So for those star seeds out there, what's important to know is that the way that I had to connect to it was through frequency, through vibration. And so working with rocks is helpful, they said, because you can, the rocks are like amplifiers, crystals. I use crystals that allow you to kind of raise your vibration and then connect to the mineral content of ThreeI Atlas. And so working with minerals helps you connect with minerals. And it's a vibrational thing. Now, I did specifically ask, are you a comet? Are you an asteroid? And I got no. And I think all of these anomalies support that as well. We just don't have the data to support the hypothesis that this is a comet. And, that's just basic scientific method. If you have a hypothesis and you don't have enough data to support that hypothesis, you can't kind of turn that into a theory, right? So we don't really have a theory of a comet. We have a hypothesis, which the data is only partially supporting, right? So when I did ask ThreeI Atlas, are you a comet? And they said no, they then gave me examples of data which disconfirmed the comet hypothesis. And so they said, you should notice that we are not diminishing in size. So a comet, as it gets closer to the sun, should diminish in size. So if anyone's following the data and I'm wrong about that, let me know if you've seen data showing that it's diminished in size. They also said that the trajectory that they're on, which this really, probabilistically unlikely trajectory coming close to all of the, 3 different planets. What is it, coming close to Mars, Earth, Jupiter, and the sun. They said that that's because they're coming here to study the life in our solar system, and that those planets that they're going near have different forms of life that they're interested in. And so they said that when they're looking at life, they're not just looking at, like carbon-based life. They're looking at all forms of life. And so some of these planets have life that's energetic, that doesn't exist in the 3D the way we do. It's not 3D life. It's life that exists in other dimensions, but it's still life. And they're also interested in life that's non-human. So they're interested in, like the rocks on planet Earth, that they also consider life. And those are also people. They're interested in the plants and the animals. And they're also interested in particular in the astral beings that occupy the astral belt around Earth. And they're really fascinated with them because they said it's kind of a unique characteristic of Earth that, not that we have different dimensions with different beings, because a lot of planets have those, but what's unique about Earth is that we have this kind of astral belt of beings which are super focused on Earth, and they're not really like living their own life independently of Earth. And so when you think about the astral realm, I think they must be talking about like the lower, but maybe the upper astral too, but the lower astral realm, which I've visited a lot as a medium and as somebody who can, go out of body and go to other realms. I have seen that there are a lot of beings in the astral realm who are people who used to be human, who died, but then they can't let go of kind of their preoccupation with Earth. And so on the astral realm, there's a lot of, there's thought forms, there are astral beings, there are, beings who were human, who died, who are just like kind of reliving their life on Earth through these kind of fantasies. And so, and of course, there's all these other planes of existence, right? There's the mental plane and the causal plane and different Buddhic planes. And there are beings on all those planes. And so 3i Atlas is very aware of this. And they were saying, we're interested in all of those beings, not just the beings that are in the 3D on Earth. And they're particularly interested in these astral beings who are so focused on 3D, even though they're not in 3D. And so I thought that was really interesting. Now, they also did say that they're controlling what kind of data our astronomers are able to pick up. And so because they're multidimensional, we're seeing like a projection of one aspect of them. And so they can control what we see. And, they're doing that in part because they don't want us to become frightened or alarmed. And we are a very fearful people, right? We have a lot of people on this planet have a fear of beings that are not like us. And we're afraid of even beings that are like in the astral realm, right? Ghosts, we're afraid of ghosts. and they live here. And so we're really afraid of any beings that live in other realms. Really, a lot of us are even afraid of like animals and plants and rocks being beings, being sentient. That scares some people. And so they don't want to, kind of freak us out. They did make a prediction about our telescopes or our arrays, our satellites, that are the things that are picking up data. They said there's going to be a point, and they didn't give me a time frame, but there's going to be a point in the future where they all stop working, because they don't want us to see something. And I kind of feel like it's because they don't want us to freak out. And so there's a point at which, like everything's going to malfunction. Now, they did also say, your data, the data that you have received from us has disconfirmed the hypothesis of comet and asteroid. Both hypotheses have been disconfirmed by the data. Okay, now on to an important question I asked them. That has to do with the star seeds, because I was connecting with them, and I'm a star seed. A star seed, for those who don't know, is somebody who has at least partial origin in another star system. So you're a human, but you may have had past lives in another star system, or you're a human who is a hybrid who's actually a mixture in terms of your DNA of human and DNA from other star systems, but you look human, right? So you're a mixed blood, but your DNA is mostly human. And so star seeds who come to planet Earth always come for a mission. We're never here randomly. And there are two main kinds of missions that star seeds have. One is to collect data to kind of send back home, kind of like an anthropologist, like, oh, what are these humans doing? And and another mission is to come here to help humans evolve, to help us raise our consciousness, to help us kind of evolve out of a warlike so-called civilization. We're kind of not considered civilized by the Galactic Federation because we're warlike. We kill each other, we harm each other, we engage in lots of we starve each other, so most planets don't operate that way. Most planets, everybody has enough, everybody, is treated well. And so we're considered kind of, you know, pre-enlightened, be the nicest word for it. And so there are a lot of star beings who are really interested in helping us to evolve past that kind of warlike way that we are. And so star seeds are those beings who chose as souls. They said, I want to incarnate on planet Earth, and I'm going to come in with these special gifts and this special perspective that I get from being a star seed. And I'm going to use that to help humanity to raise their consciousness, to evolve, to have a, expanded awareness of reality. And so they said that the presence of ThreeI Atlas is important for star seeds because star seeds can tune in to ThreeI Atlas. And they didn't say just star seeds. So I want to kind of extend this invitation to all of the, psychics and light workers and mystics and healers out there who have an interest in ThreeI Atlas to make an effort to connect to ThreeI Atlas. And they did recommend that you hold crystals in your hand that would help you. The process that they put me through to connect to them was that I had to raise my vibration high enough that they could then connect. So, I have to raise and they have to lower. So it's kind of similar when you're working as a medium and you have to raise your vibration to communicate with a spirit that's in a different plane. Or if you're a mystic and you're trying to work with, angelic energy or some type of high level divine energy, godlike energy, you have to raise your vibration, and then that high level being kind of lowers a little bit to meet you, because we're living in very different vibrations, right? We're existing in very different vibrations. And so this is what you want to do: go into a meditation, hold crystals, ask the crystals to assist you. Ask them to assist you in connecting to the crystals of ThreeI Atlas. So you're tuning into the crystalline structure of your rocks, and then they're able to help you connect to the crystalline structure of ThreeI Atlas. And this is really important because, and I'm using they as just a non-gendered pronoun because we don't know what the gender of ThreeI Atlas is. So they said this is really important because we're in this shift, right? This shift in consciousness, people call it an ascension. We're in this kind of pivotal moment for humanity. And one of the things that's changing at this time is that we're learning to expand our understanding of knowledge. And so we're currently living in a society with a really narrow definition of what counts as knowledge, where we exclude any knowledge that's not, empirical in the way that empiricism is currently defined, and any data that's not, attained by using the scientific method. And it's not even just the scientific method, but it has to be produced in a particular societal structure, right? So like, it can't be amateur astronomers, it has to be professional astronomers. It can't be, right? It has to be people in institutions, right? We have a lot of rules about what counts as, as knowledge. And what we're realizing, or what they were explaining that we need to realize, is that there are other sources of knowledge, like intuition, psychic, mediumship, mysticism, talking to animals, talking to plants, talking to rocks. Like, these are other sources of knowledge which have been known or called superstitious or primitive or whatever by the Western world after colonization. And that has become the mainstream position, that all of these other sources of knowledge are invalid. And so what 3i Atlas said is that that has to change. We're in this, this ascension moment where that is changing. And that's why we're seeing the rise of the divine feminine. That's why we're seeing the dreaming women, of which I am one. That's why we're seeing the 4 a.m. club. That's why we're seeing all of these people waking up after the big joust back in November, because we are evolving as a species. And so they said that it's really important for all the star seeds and all the other people who can connect with 3i Atlas to connect and to share what they're getting, so that we have those sources of knowledge out here. So that we don't just have the data from the astronomers, but we also have the data from the psychics. And this is especially important right now because the astronomers are not sharing what they're getting, right? NASA's not making announcements. They're not sharing images. The European Space Agency is not sharing images. There was one image they shared that was not a very good image. And so and the other space agencies around the world are not sharing data. So it's actually a good thing, they said, because this absence of scientific data is going to kind of propel other people like myself to tune in and try to get information in another way. And this is actually an important part of our evolution, of our conscious evolution, is for us to start to be able to tune into other forms of knowledge. So I hope this was helpful. It was a real mix, of the science and the psychic. And so let me know what you thought in the comments. Also, if you are getting any information that I'm not, please share it. If you're tuning in, if you're remote viewing, if you're connecting mystically or psychically, if you are following some of the astronomers' data and you have some updates. Oh, that reminds me, there was an update today. I almost forgot that I did want to talk about. And I saw this on Dobsonian's channel, where there was an image that came out from a professional astronomer that came out yesterday on October 16th that showed that there is no tail. So this was a study that can be found on astronomerstelegram.org from a professional astronomer, where they were trying to study an image from a telescope of the comet in quotes, to look for a tail, and they concluded that there was no tail. And so that just came out October 16th. So that's the newest bit of kind of confirmation for what I've been saying and what 3i Atlas has been saying, and that is that the data does not support the hypothesis that this is a comet. No tail, no comet. It's kind of like calling something a dog and it's got no snout, no tail, fur, like there are things that a dog has to have to be a dog. This is, a comet needs a tail to be a comet. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong in the comments and tell me why. So thank you for listening. Oh, and I always forget to say, please like and comment, like, comment, and subscribe. I also have a Patreon account you can join if you want to support me and get some behind the scenes videos where I go into more detail about how I work and what information I get and how.